Good morning, everybody. Actually, I have watched a video for Richard Dawkins. As you know, Richard Dawkins, he's the biggest atheist in the world. He was meeting Rana Ahmed, and he gave her a warm greetings because she left Islam. Actually, I would like to open the eyes, both eyes for Rana Ahmed, to see how is Richard Dawkins, from his talk, how he's explaining the universe. Richard Dawkins, he was giving a lecture and he was explaining the universe, and he gave, for that explanations, he gave 3 explanations. First explanation, that God did it. And the second explanation for the universe is called it Marshall physics, that still we not have a full theory to explain everything, and once we do, that time we are able to explain the universe. And the third explanation is about the multiverse. So he escaped to the Steven Weinberg, and as you know, Steven Weinberg, he's the physics scientist, and he told him that I explain the universe with the 3 things, 3 explanations. And he told him, what replied to him Steven Weinberg? Steven Weinberg told him, nobody knows the fix that we are in, that is a lot of laws in the nature, we cannot derive them in the mathematical consistency, and we will be left with a question, why and whom behind this nature. I would like Rana Ahmed to see the second explanation and the third explanation, and she can imagine what the knowledge of that man, Richard Dawkins.
Well, theists say God did it. God twiddled the knobs and tuned the physical constants to have exactly the right values. That, of course, is no explanation at all, because it leaves unexplained the tuner. It's just pushing the problem back one step. So we can instantly discount explanation number 1. Explanation number 2 is adopted by physicists, I think Steven Weinberg, who was quoted earlier in this conference. Steven Weinberg, Nobel Prize-winning physicist from Texas, I think his view is that we don't yet understand enough physics, and when we do, when we have the longed-for theory of everything, the TOE, we will then realize that these knobs are not for tuning. There is no freedom. There are no degrees of freedom. There's only one way for a universe to be. Having accepted the word of physicists that there is an element of fine-tuning, and I've tried to lay out 3 possible explanations. One would be God, which, as I've said, isn't an explanation at all. One would be the multiverse, and then anthropically, with hindsight, saying we have to be sitting in one of the universes that could give us. But the third one, which I've attributed to you, possibly wrongly, would be what I call the macho physicists, who say, well, it's just that we don't understand why these things that are the way they are. One day we will, when we have a theory of everything, it will be understood. But it sounds from our conversation as though that I misrepresented you there.
I don't think one should underestimate the fix we're in, that in the end we will not be able to explain the world, that we will have some set of laws of nature. We will not be able to derive them on the grounds simply of mathematical consistency, because we can already think of mathematically consistent laws that don't describe the world as we know it. And we will always be left with a question, why are the laws of nature what they are rather than some other laws? And I don't see any way out of that. that the constants of nature are suitable for life, which is clearly true, we observe.
The final idea, which I think probably most physicists at least have some time for, is the multiverse theory.
No one has constructed a theory in which that's true. I mean, it's not only a speculation, the theory would be speculative, but we don't have a theory in which that speculation is mathematically realized.
Yeah.
So, but it's a possibility.
And the fact that the cancellation is so precise means that the number of universes in the multiverse you need to postulate in order to anthropically be comfortable with it is very, very large.
And it must be at least 10 to the 56, or in fact,
exactly, yeah.
If you think you have some idea about fluctuations at even shorter distances, I think you would say at least 10 to the 120. In fact, that's a little disturbing.
So, if he not able to explain, the Richard Dawkins, he not able to explain the universe, why I should follow him blindly? Driver blind? Why I follow a man who doesn't know anything about explanation of the universe? Regarding the multiverse, what Steven Weinberg, I will not go to explain more, but I would like her to watch that video carefully. Also, in that interview, that lady, Rana Ahmed, said that her brother wanted to kill her. And actually, Richard Dawkins tried to impute the violence, the terrorism to Islam, directly or indirectly. Actually, if her brother misunderstands something in Islam, and a lot of people thinking that anybody left Islam, anybody on the way killed him. No. That is actually not in the Islam, not in the Quran. Actually, if anybody left Islam, they will discuss him, they will clarify him what he's not understand. And that will not be in the normal people on the way, but will be also the leader who is giving the judge, not that is anybody as the people think. He can do whatever he wants to do. And actually, the main things, because Rana Ahmed has got Islamic background, and she knows that a lot of verses in the Holy Quran give a freedom distance for the man to select his religion. A lot of verses, and she knows that. I don't want to read that verses now, but she knows that one. So once the man left Islam, after he gave him a freedom of choice, once he left Islam, they will clarify for him, they will discuss him, and he will not be able to fight in Islam in the public and destroy the Islam and try to put, because he misunderstands some things, try to put wrong information about Islam. And really that is in the law of the countries, which if anybody revealed a secrets of the country, of the army, they will punish him and they will call that is a major treason. What about the religion? if you are going to fight a religion, if you are going to talk about that in the public and give misinformations about Islam and destroy Islam, definitely you'll get a punishment. But if you are a freedom thinking and discussing, that will nobody come and fight you and kill you. In another hand, Richard Dawkins, we think that he is spreading the knowledge. He put a little lie for the Quranic verses. For example, he went to a school and he was asking the students about what makes a Quran scientific evidence and a good source for the knowledge. And the lady student gave him information about some verses in the Holy Quran. For example, a natural barrier, seawater and fresh water not mix in the sea, don't mix in the sea. So he twisted this information in the public and said, this phenomena, actually he knows this phenomena, it is happening in the sea, and the lady, if he doesn't know, the lady was explaining him as a natural barrier, but he went to the public and changed it as a 2 glasses. And let this lady Rana Ahmed watch this video carefully and to see, and that is actually, that information was called a helocline, and it was who told the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, from 14th century, which was no technology in that time, who told him about this phenomena happening in the sea. And the important things I want her to see, how he changed the reality.
And how in the sea, the 2 waters, they don't mix, but they pass through each other.
Salty water and fresh water don't mix in the sea.
No, it's like the natural barrier.
I was shocked that RE elbows out science like this. So you think the Quran is a good source of scientific information?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And you're the one who wants to be a doctor. Is that right? Yes. The pupils that I spoke to quite clearly think that the Quran is a superior source of scientific information than evidence. And they told me, for example, that salt water and fresh water don't mix. The reason? Because it says that in the Quran. Now, alas, I lacked the presence of mind to turn to the teacher sitting next to me and say, will you please, at the very next science lesson, get some salt water, get some fresh water, and mix them and see what happens.
الذي مرج البحرين هذا عذب فرات وهذا ملح أجاج وجعل بينهما برزخا وحجرا محجورا.
The flooded caverns can play tricks on you in other ways. What seems like air isn't. It's just another kind of water. This is a halocline, a meeting of fresh and salt water. Fresh water from the jungle flows over the heavier salt water from the sea.
And also to see how much knowledge Richard Dawkins has, I want her also to follow and watch this debate between him and Dr. Deepak Chopra. The debate and how Deepak Chopra was explaining him that the things has awareness, the things has sentience, but he was tried to remove the sentence and tried actually they are not able, the atheist people, they are not able to explain about the awareness, about the love, about the maturity, about the common sense, about the passion, about the mercy, about the compassion. They're not able to explain because that is the science not explain it. That is actually the religions explain that things. But I would like her also to watch this debate between Deepak Chopra and Richard Dawkins to see the much knowledge of between them.
Yet again, let's talk about sentience. You say the universe has sentience. The universe doesn't have sentience. Things in the universe have sentience. Why do you confuse this audience by saying the universe has sentience?
Can you tell me what the composition of the universe is?
That wasn't the question.
No, because you're talking things, right? Things are basically the atomic universe is stardust, and stardust has sentience in you and me. According to people like Freeman Dyson, even atoms have sentience.
Atoms have no sentience.
You disagree with Freeman Dyson?
Yeah, if that's what he says, which I doubt, I disagree with him. Atoms do not have sentience. Atoms contribute to making brains. Brains have sentience. You need a highly complicated organization. It's a fundamental error to say that because a complicated thing has a quality like sentience, musicality, mathematical ability, and is made of atoms, therefore the atoms have sentience, musical ability, mathematical ability, etc. They do not. Atoms have to be arranged in complicated organizations, complicated structures interacting with each other, and then you will get emergent properties such as sentience, such as poetry, such as mathematical ability, such as spirituality. These things do not inhere in the atoms themselves, or if they do, you've got a hard job to prove it.
You have a hard job to prove it? Can't you prove it?
I'm sure you're aware of the hard problem of consciousness. I'm sure you're aware that we have no science that tells us why we have any experience, whether it's mental, subjective, or it's an experience of the objective world. How photons coming and hitting our retina create the experience of a three-dimensional reality in space and time. This is the hard problem. It's the most fundamental problem in science. First, what is the stuff of the universe? And second, why is there awareness of the universe? Is awareness of the universe and the universe the same thing? Because if there was a universe outside of your awareness, for all practical purposes, you would never know it. So to say that sentience is an emergent property is assuming that only brains produce consciousness, whereas in fact, even a single fertilized cell, when you were conceived, was fully alive, was fully aware, and did not have a brain. It was present, it was aware, and it differentiated into trillions of cells, more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy, to create who you are. So to say that sentience requires an emergence through evolution, instead of saying that actually evolution could be driven by consciousness, these are the questions that some people are asking. And if you propose that sentience is an emergent property, then answer to me why there is no science that can actually give us an explanation to the two most fundamental questions of our existence. What is the nature of the universe? What's it made up of? And why is there sentience? Why is there sentience? You know, we talk about sentience as not just human sentience, which is, of course, you know, an evolutionary process, but Sentience came from sentience.
Have you seriously...
Evolution does not explain the origin of life. It only explains the transformation of species.
Yes, you changed the subject again.
You will have 1 minute and 1 minute, and we will finish with this topic of the universe. And
have you seriously just said that a single cell has consciousness?
A single cell has awareness.
What do you mean by that?
That it has the ability to respond to its environment.
Of course it has the ability to respond to its environment. That is not consciousness.
So you said a while ago, atoms get together to create complexity. How do they get together?
By processes which are well understood
by
biologists.
By a process which is random or intelligent?
Not intelligence.
Okay.
By the processes of embryology put together by the processes of evolution. You cannot seriously sit there and say that the hard problem of consciousness, and it is a very hard problem, is solved by saying that a single cell has consciousness.
A single cell has sentience in the fact that it can respond to its environment and express its biological autonomy.
But, okay, just 1 second, please. Un segundo, por favor. I think we're in a little loop because we cannot prove either things.
You know, I want to nail this. I want to nail this. This gets to the root of the problem.
It does.
Consciousness is something very, very complicated. Of course we don't understand it. That's why it's called the hard problem. It's something that happens when brains reach a certain level of complexity. Now, a single cell, a single neuron, a single amoeba, a single cell, a thermostat even, has sentience in your sense. But that is nothing to do with...
Has the ability to take in information, process information, and respond with autonomy. That is sentience.
That's trivial. That's utterly trivial.
You're confusing perception with awareness. Perception is not fundamental reality. If there was an insect with 100 eyes looking at me, it wouldn't experience the same me as you are. So perception is a species-specific and culture-specific experience in consciousness. It has nothing to do with fundamental reality, the awareness that differentiates into what we call, in us anyway, cognition, perception, imagination, insight, intuition, creativity, choice, freedom, the desire for meaning, purpose. All of that are expressions of awareness as consciousness and influence everything that we experience in life.
You think a single cell has that? And you think
a
single
cell
has
a rudimentary form of awareness.
Do you think an atom has that?
Sorry?
Do you think an atom has that?
According to Freeman Dyson, yes.
Freeman Dyson says an atom has awareness.
Yes, sir. Check it out.
Señoras y señores, un aplauso para los dos.
In another way, there is also a doctor called, he's an American doctor called Lawrence Brown. He got a miracle 2 times as his daughter was sick in the hospital, and he was a very biggest doctor, but he's not able to do anything that time, and he prayed the prayer of atheist prayer. I would like everybody thinking to left his religion, to left Islam, and to be an atheist. I would like him to watch this video for this doctor carefully.
Greetings and peace. This is Dr. Lawrence Brown with another episode of Interfaith Issues. I'm coming to you today with a topic that might surprise a lot of you. And that is that today I'm going to talk about how I became Muslim. Through these talks and through my other works, a number of people have approached me and asked how I became Muslim and why. And if for no other reason than simply to tell the story once, answer everybody's questions, and let people know how I made this major change in my life and in my religion, I've decided to tell the story. The story takes us back to 1990. Before 1990, I was the typical American. I basically subscribed to the philosophy that the person who died with the most toys wins. I had spent my life accumulating different things of this world, and that was the only thing that I knew. That was the only objective I knew in life. In 1990, my second daughter was born. I guess I wasn't listening the first time. When my first daughter was born, Christina, about 10 months before, she did something I had never seen any child do before, and that is that she was able to stand from the very first day of life. From the very first day, if I put her on her feet, she would stand upright by herself. Now, I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I understand that that is something that a newborn baby is not supposed to be able to do. But I didn't see it as a miracle. I saw it as something interesting, something charming about this child. But I guess I didn't get the message. I guess the message had to come to me twice, and the second time in a more dramatic way. So, 10 months later, in 1990, my second daughter, Hannah, was born. Now, Hannah was taken directly from the birthing room in the hospital to the neonatal intensive care unit. And at the time, I didn't know why. They did not tell me. I was a doctor working in the hospital. It was George Washington University Hospital, one of the most famous hospitals in the United States. That was the hospital where President Ronald Reagan went when he was shot. You cannot fault the medical care at that hospital. They had the highest medical care. So, when I found out that my second daughter was blue, I was very concerned. I went and saw her in the intensive care unit. From the level of her chest down to her toes, she was a dusky, the only way I can describe it is a gunmetal blue, this deep, deep, dusky kind of blue. Now, for those of you in the medical profession, you understand what that means. A lot of people, even outside the medical profession, understand what that means, but for those of you who don't, you know how when you look at the veins in your arms, in a pale-skinned person like myself, those veins are blue. The reason why is because blood, when it is carrying oxygen, is red. When the blood does not have oxygen, it turns blue. And that was the color of my child. We took a cardiac ultrasound. It showed that she had a coarctation of the aorta. Now, the aorta is the major vessel that comes off of the heart and then sweeps down to the rest of the body, carrying all of the blood for the body from the chest down. And a coarctation is a critical narrowing in that artery. We could see where the artery was normal size. We could see where it was normal size on the other side, but right in the middle, there was this tight coarctation where the artery narrowed down to almost nothing. So that was the condition of my child. She was dying. Her body was suffocating. Now, as a doctor, I understood what this meant. I had assisted on numerous cardiothoracic surgeries. I knew that this almost certainly meant for this child that she would undergo emergency thoracic surgery. They would cut open her chest. They would replace the vessel with a graft. And these children, in general, don't do well. Given the technology of the time, about 20 years ago, my expectation was that my daughter would have the surgery, survive a few years, need to have the surgery again to replace the graft as she grew, and eventually the graft would fail and she would die. Now, that was my understanding at the time. That was the understanding of the intensivist, the doctor caring for my daughter at the time. So we were standing over this one-day-old baby, not even one-day-old baby, whose body was dying for lack of oxygen, and we were just watching her die. They called in a cardiothoracic surgeon from the Children's Hospital across town in Washington, D.C. When he came to see my daughter, I had to leave because I was emotional and I was not helping things. I was not helping them to do their job. I left the intensive care unit. I went down the hallway. Because it's an intensive care unit, there's a prayer room nearby. Now, I remember very clearly walking into that room and praying for the first time in my life with sincerity. And I remember it because I had never prayed with sincerity before. All of my life, I had been in charge. If there was anything that I needed, I knew how to go after it. If there was anything I wanted, I knew what I had to do to get it. I had never been in the position in my life where I faced a situation that I felt I couldn't handle it, where I knew that I was helpless. Now, a lot of people think that I came to Islam through Christianity. In a way, that's true, and I'll come to that. But at the time, it was not. I was never, at any time in my life, Christian. I used to be atheist. I was one of those who denied the existence of God. In fact, I tried to argue people away from believing in God. When I went into that prayer room, I remember one thing hit me right away, and that is that it was just a prayer room. There were no crosses, no crucifixes, no statues. There were no religious symbols at all. And immediately, I felt it was the right place to be. But because I was atheist, I prayed a prayer which I have since come to know is a little bit infamous. It's a kind of a weak prayer, but it has its strength. And that prayer is, "Oh God, if you are there." You have to remember, I had spent all of my life denying God, denying His existence. At that moment, I realized there was nothing I could do. There was nothing in my worldly power to help this child. And I knew that the only power, if it did exist, that could help my child was the Almighty. So the only way I could pray was to pray, "Oh God, if you are there." And I admitted, I was honest. I said, "I don't know if you're there or not. But if you are there, I need help." And I made a deal. I made a promise. I asked God if He saved my daughter, and then if He guided me to the religion that was most pleasing to Him, that I would follow. And I remember those words precisely. Asking Him to guide me to the religion that was most pleasing to Him and promising to follow. Well, I had been away for maybe 15 minutes. I walked back to the intensive care unit. When I entered the unit, the doctors were huddled around my daughter like a football team in the huddle. They were on the other side of the room at one end. When I walked in, they looked up at me, and I could see something had changed. When I walked up to them, the cardiothoracic surgeon just looked me in the eye and said she was going to be okay. The doctors around me did not understand it. He went on to give an explanation. He started talking about a patent ductus arteriosus and how he explained the fact that my daughter was going to be okay. And I looked around at the other doctors' faces, and I realized that I was not the only one that did not buy that explanation. And I realized that although that explanation worked for him, it just simply didn't work for me. I had prayed with sincerity for the first time in my life, and I could only believe that this was the hand of my Creator. We took an ultrasound before that showed this life-limiting condition. We took an ultrasound after, and she was completely stone-cold normal. She never had surgery. She never had medicine. She just went to becoming a completely normal child. As a matter of fact, she entered college this year. When I saw this miracle, I realized I had made a promise. And I realized that if I did not fulfill that promise, I would be blameworthy. So I started searching. I had promised my Creator that if He would guide me to the religion most pleasing to Him, that I would follow. And the last thing I wanted was to die with that promise being unfulfilled. I would love to continue and finish the story all in one go, but we have an obligation to our sponsors, and so I ask you to be patient, bear with us. We're going to break for a few minutes. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Dr. Lawrence Brown again, speaking on the subject of my conversion to Islam. And I will just continue the story that I started, telling how and why I became Muslim. So, I started reading scriptures of a variety of religions. I studied Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, read into the Bhagavad Gita, started studying Hinduism, worked my way around to Judaism, Christianity, started working myself up the ladder of the revealed monotheistic religions. With each religion I encountered, I basically just came to the conclusion that, well, no, that's not it. It didn't take me long to decide against Buddhism, against Taoism, against Hinduism. That's why I ended up studying Judaism. When I studied Judaism, I felt, okay, now here there is some truth, but there are also some things that I did not believe. I found inconsistencies in the Old Testament, which we'll talk about in another show, inshallah. I found the prediction of 3 prophets to follow, and that obviously raised the question, well, if those prophets do not count as John the Baptist and Jesus Christ as the first 2 of those 3, who else could it be? So I moved on to Christianity. As I studied Christianity, I just was looking for the answer anywhere I could find it. I studied with the Southern Baptists, the Quakers, the Greek Orthodox, the Roman Catholics, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists. My head is kind of swimming with all of the sects of Christianity that I approached for longer or shorter periods of time. And in the end, I could never get my answers. I would go to the priests, having actually done something that very few Christians, in my experience, really do, and that is reading the Bible and questioning aspects of it. Now, Please understand, I don't mean this to put down anybody out there. I don't mean this as a criticism to Christians who hold on to their faith, but I just mean to say that most Christians accept their faith unconditionally without really analyzing it. I found Jesus Christ calling himself the Son of Man, so I wanted the priest to tell me, why do Christians call him the Son of God if he called himself the Son of Man? I found Jesus Christ in 3 places asked, what is the most important commandment? And he said, know, O Israel, your God is one God. And I couldn't find the Trinity anywhere. I said, well, if the Trinity is not in the Bible, why are people teaching it? Why are people believing it? Why are people following it? Why are people professing it? And they said, well, it's First Epistle of John, chapter 5, verse 7. And I found out that that's a forgery. It doesn't exist in the original manuscripts, which is why it has been modified in the more modern Bibles. It is why you do not any longer find in the reputable Bibles published in modern day, you do not find it talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and these 3 are one. You don't find that anymore because the scholars of modern times have recognized that that was a misleading insertion. As Scofield's Reference Bible states, it's an interpolation. It's a misleading insertion. I wanted the priests to answer these questions for me, and I never found a single one of any sect anywhere who could. I felt almost more lost than before. I believed in what Jesus Christ taught. I believed that he was a prophet. I believed in God as one God. I believed that man's relation with God is direct, without intercessor. I believed that we are accountable for our actions. I could not believe that we carried the taint of original sin, a sin that we never committed. I was at odds with Trinitarian theology, but I was in agreement with everything Jesus Christ taught. And I found these two to be different, and no priest could explain this to me. For a couple of years, I was searching, not finding anything, because in the West, in America, really about the last religion most people even think to consider is Islam. It wasn't until I learned about Islam, about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that everything suddenly made sense. Everything fell in place. The Old Testament's prediction of 3 prophets to follow, John the Baptist being 1, Jesus Christ being 2. Who is the 3rd? The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him. Everything else fell in place. All of the teachings of Jesus Christ, his teaching that God is one, his teaching that the prophets, including himself, were men, his teaching that we are directly accountable to God, without intercessor, no saints in the way, no priests that you have to make confession to or seek absolution from. No, our account is directly to God, without intercessor. And I found the consistency in the creed throughout the chain of revelation. This was my reason for embracing Islam. I found in Islam the answer to my search in the continuity of the chain of revealed revelation. I found Islam as the conclusion in the chain of revelation. Now, that's my story. It's a very personal story, and maybe nobody benefits from it except for me. But it seems like everybody has a testimonial. And God guides who he wills. And if you are sincere, he will guide you to the straight path. But if you have some disease in your heart, if you have some insincerity, if you have some desire for the world, where you do not put God as your priority, you can easily fall into this trap. You start out thanking God and you end up directing your worship to an element of His creation, worshiping the creation instead of the Creator. A few years later, as a doctor, I had a patient who had a son who was born with a lethal heart problem. It looked like he was going to die. She prayed to God. She asked for God to save her child, and she promised. Her child got better, the same as mine had. And you know what? She didn't keep her promise. She went back on it. And I guess that kind of concludes my story, because when I saw that, I realized that I didn't become Muslim because I'm so smart, because I figured it out, whereas somebody else maybe didn't. No. Here was this woman in the exact same situation. She was praying for the salvation of her child with a lethal heart defect, just as I had had a child with a lethal heart defect. And what was the difference between the two of us? The difference was simply that Allah guided me to Islam and made me sincere. And for whatever reason, she did not. She failed in her test. If there was one message I would send to the audience, it is just this. We come to the religion of truth not on our own, except as we ask for it. Allah guides those who He wills. Pray to Allah by whatever name you know Him. Pray to the Creator with sincerity. Ask Him to guide you in your heart and in your mind to the religion of truth and to make you pleased with it. And you will find, if you are sincere, and if Allah answers your prayer, you will find that the religion of truth enters your heart. And inshallah, you will join us as a brother or sister in Islam. Thank you for being my audience on yet another episode, Interfaith Issues. We will continue again, inshallah, and I look forward to being with you then. Peace, and may God be with us all.
I feel the peace.
Finally, dear brothers and sisters, I would like to invite you all to read this book, Decimation of Atheism. Decimation of Atheism. There are two parts of this book. His Grand Mufti, His Eminence, Sheikh Ahmed bin Hamad al-Khalili, he put a lot of scientific evidence, chemistry, physics, atoms evidence, and a lot of in this book. And for Rana Ahmed, if she asked about this book, we are able to give her for free, and we send it to her. Just to contact us, and we will send it to her for free. And hopefully, inshallah, it will be in also in software. This book. Actually, here His Eminence was giving a nice story about Dr. Karl Werner. Dr. Karl Werner, who was supporting a Darwinic theory, and he was an atheist. But when his friend asked him, I challenge you to prove a Darwinic theory. And he asked him, for example, if the protein cannot form naturally, how is the life started in the earth? So that question was very difficult for him, and Dr. Werner was searching 30 years. 30 years was searching. 18 years he was read a lot of books in a lot of fields, chemistry, physics, and historical, a lot of books. And 12 years he went a journey outside to search fossils records, and he met a lot of scholars, a lot of scientists about the fossils records. And finally he saw the creatures which is left thousands years ago, which is was in thousands years ago, still that fossils, still that creatures is in this time is still available. So he wrote his book, Biggest Experiments, so this lady can read that book also for Dr. Werner. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like everybody to open his eyes, because the life is very short and we are going to go from here, from this life.